I thought of pulling our shit off Spotify just to like, say like fuck them removing the 70 episodes of Rogan's show. But then I'm like, he's still in bed with them. Like he's not turning his back on them, because if he were to say, and this is coming from somebody who doesn't even know him.
I was gonna say, do you know Rogan at all?
No, but if he were to say, Spotify's done me dirty, fuck them, like they've completely like ruined this podcasting for me or whatever, then that would seem like, but they're kind of fucked because everybody's mad at them.
They're not though. They're not though. So they're not. Yeah, I wish I could talk more about it.
The most liberal people on my fucking Twitter feed are mad as fuck at Spotify, and the most conservative people also are mad as fuck at Spotify.
Yeah, but you think about the bitch you got to be to get on Twitter and like give your opinion on Joe Rogan when you don't know him, or for anything for that matter. If you don't know the guy, and then also with Spotify, just to go back to pulling the 70 episodes. The owner of Spotify is a Swedish dude. He's a man's man. He's also a businessman. So their business went up $2 billion, so they underpaid Joe Rogan. I tell him this all the time, bust his balls. I'm like, dude, you got hustled. You got underpaid. So they went up $2 billion in valuation as a business. So that guy's a businessman. And I put it like this. Spotify is on Rogan. Rogan was making stupid money before he went to Spotify. He benefited Spotify. Joe didn't get bigger going to Spotify.
Right.
Spotify's on Rogan. And when it comes to the episodes, Joe has full creative control. So his team's going, all right, these ones are kind of dicey. Fuck it, let's pull them down. Spotify's not pulling them down.
You don't think?
No.
He just interviewed Majid Nawaz, and they didn't put that one out yet. And I'm thinking, like, I would assume Rogan wants it out, and that Spotify is the one who doesn't want it out because he probably said some shit that was controversial about COVID.
I'd be surprised. Because their contract, I'd be surprised.
Can't they just bleep out the fucking N-word and then just put those episodes back up, or like, trim the little jokes that they decided were offensive 10 years later?
You could, but then also, if you're Joe, do you really give a fuck? You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, pull him down. I don't give a fuck.
There's a lot of integrity behind in just having your whole catalog still up there. Like when he left YouTube, or left, YouTube and all the podcast apps for Spotify, I never would have imagined we would be in a place where such a big chunk of his catalog has been removed.
Do you go back and listen to those old ones?
Fuck no, but I mean, it's nice to know that they're there, Like,
I'm with you, but at the same time, it's like we're fighting this fight. We're like, you're trying to silence them, and I want to be like, oh, do you go back and listen to the ones from 2014? Like, no. It's like
But I've been listening since 2014, so to me, it would be kind of redundant. But also, like,
it goes against what he stands for. I get that, and what all of us stand for, and freedom of speech, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's like he wins, man. And all this shit they're doing, it's making him bigger.
Did you ever have a podcast removed from YouTube?
Maybe for like some content stuff, like I'll play a music video or something, like I don't own the music to, they might pull it down, but very rarely. My team's on it.
There's been a few for me over the years. I'm pretty sure we had our interview with Magic Don Juan removed for like promoting sex trafficking because he's a fucking pimp, because he walks around with a big bejeweled cup.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
I'm pretty sure that got removed for promoting sex trafficking.
And do you guys get a lot of like where they demonetize you on YouTube?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, I mean all the time. They'll be like, hey, this one. I'm like, for what?
Right.
Like, oh, well, you cussed 2 minutes in. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
And it turns out that if you start a podcast and you have Wiz Khalifa with a pound of weed sitting in front of him, that they will demonetize you.
That's insane.
Largely.
That's insane.
Right, because that's just like part of his body.
Yeah, it's his thing. Yeah. And it's also legal in most states, for God's sakes.
Why is YouTube so much more hardcore about it now than they used to be, when weed is clearly so much... But I mean, it is still federally illegal, so that's why they can't really like fully just let it go, I guess.
I get it, but then also they have what is it, YouTube Red, then you have Patreon, where I'm sure you could just release whatever the fuck you want on Patreon, which that helps. But then with YouTube, it's also like, put a disclaimer on mine. Right. Like, I'm not in the kids section, but if you want, put a disclaimer on, like,
but that's basically what they're doing, because like, but then they only show it to a small audience, and they don't like give you as much. They put a much smaller percentage of their potential ad inventory on your videos, like when they limit you.
The shadow, like, have you had some of your stuff shadow banned where it should get like crazy views, and you're like, what's going on here?
Oh yeah.
Like, I did this Rogan rant, and I'm like, oh, it's gonna blow up, and then I'm looking, I'm like, oh, what's going on here? And then one of my boys like, yeah, my Rogan thing got taken down. I'm like, what?
Do you think?
Yeah, it's not good. Yeah.
So just talking about him in general, his name might be a 4-letter word right now.
I think it depends in the context. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of it during the height of COVID, I'm sure you get like talked about it to a certain degree. Certain COVID stuff will trigger their
Right.
program where it will put a disclaimer on it or get you demonetized or get you taken down.
You want to know my little Rogan story?
I'd love to hear it.
One of my fans was in an airport many years ago, maybe 2014, maybe 2015, something like that. They were in an airport and they were on acid. And they go up to Joe Rogan and say, bro, there's this guy, Adam. You need to go on his podcast, No Jumper, or something. And Joe fucking follows me and DMs me on Twitter and just says that.
That's hilarious.
But then at the same time, I get hit up by somebody else who goes, bro, my friend was on acid and he ran up on Joe Rogan at the airport.
Hilarious. And Joe was cool about it.
He followed me, but I never talked to him after that.
You'd crush on there. You'd be a great guest on there.
What direction do you think you should go? You think you should go like more science, more like public square, important discourse, or you think he should just be like, fuck it, I'm gonna just kind of have more lighthearted conversations?
He should do what do what he's doing. Do whatever and this is what's so crazy that he's like the face of all this. Like he decided to start that show just because he's interested in stuff. So he has no one's telling him to have anybody on. He has people on that he wants to have on because he thinks they're interesting or they're being silenced. He wants their perspective, whether he agrees with it or not. That's why mainstream media's their ratings are fucking terrible because they have an agenda. Joe doesn't. So for him, he just needs to keep doing whatever he wants to do. So keep having comics on, keep having Jordan Peterson on, Kevin Hart. Do whatever you want to do. Just do that. He doesn't feel that way. But I'm saying, don't feel like you have an obligation to make sure that you're putting people on that give this this kind of information. That's not your responsibility. Nobody. He didn't go, hey, I want to make sure I'm the leader of COVID and misinformation. He was just doing his thing.
Right. It's just crazy how just doing your thing, like I'm just doing my thing. Like I'm talking to whoever.
All we are. That's all we're doing.
But I'm allowed to just keep doing my thing because I'm not the most important podcaster in the world. Like once
But in 5 years,
right.
when you get there, like I'm saying, you're crushing it.
But
so
that's the reason why we're having this conversation about Joe Rogan is because of the fact that he became the most important podcaster in the world, which I feel like to some extent he probably like wishes wasn't the case, because it would be nice if there was some other guy who's bigger than him that could be taking all this bullshit so that he didn't necessarily have to be the one going through the fucking brick wall, But it's just crazy how by becoming so popular, all of a sudden the standard for what he's doing could become so different than it is for everybody else.
And it's also not fun when you do that. Like it's not fun anymore when it becomes a business and you feel like you have this obligation and give everybody the correct facts or that the media thinks the correct. Like I want to do a podcast or a show if people are like, hey, make sure you follow this outline. I'm like, get the what?
Right.
Like we had Michael Chandler on my show, Food Truck Diaries, today. And he's like, oh, what do you want to do? I'm like, I have no agenda, dude. I'm not a journalist. If you want, what are you into? Into fishing? I'll talk about fucking fishing for an hour. Like literally whatever you want to do, man. I have no agenda here. Literally whatever. You create the show. So if you want to talk about shoes, I'm down to talk about shoes. Whatever you want to do, man. Kids, he's a dad, I'm a dad. Let's talk about your kid, man. I don't care.
But it is weird, though, because sometimes like it's occurred to me, like I've been doing a podcast with somebody and we'll start talking about food and I'll be like, we could talk about food for like the next half hour. No problem.
Yeah.
But
if it's interesting.
Why would the fucking audience want to hear us talk about food necessarily? Now, if it's funny or if it like is kind of informative or entertaining, but sometimes it's like when I'm interviewing somebody, it's like I'm trying to do the math problem in my head of like, what makes this guy interesting? Like, what can I get out of this person that maybe hasn't been done before?
For sure, as long as it's not like a got you moment. You know what I'm saying? Like where you're TMZ or a journalist or you're trying to break news. I don't get down with that shit. But the reason you're successful and your show's good is because you're interested in that stuff. And same way, I've been doing it so long, I can feel when I'm like, we got to get out of this, man. Like you're carrying on about fucking corn nuts for the past 30 minutes.
You probably have people watching this because this is like a very hip-hop platform. I'm not saying that you're not hip-hop, but this is a very hip-hop platform. I feel like there might be people watching this who don't even like aren't really that cognizant of your podcast career so much as like, holy fuck, that's Brendan from the UFC, and now they're probably like rekindling their interest in you through this, just because I feel like our audience might be like have like a whole different compartment
which
of
is
people
dope.
than your shit.
Which is dope. Yeah,
I just had to tell him that Joe
wanted to do
Rogan
this
has a
show.
podcast the other day.
Oh, hell yeah. I love you, man.
He didn't know. He goes, the motherfucker from Fear Factor?
That's lit. That is fucking lit. I find it so funny when I'd be doing shows with Joe, and it was when he lived here in L.A., and they'd go, oh, what are you doing time? Like, I'm at the store, man. I'm doing a Rogan show. And like, Joe Rogan? The Fear Factor guy? I'm like, yeah?
Yeah.
You don't... He's been a comedian for 35 years. Like that's his main gig is he's a stand-up comedian, man. Like the UFC guy,
the UFC thing, the most popular podcast in the world thing. But I like that he lives in that bubble.
I love
Don't
that.
you like
dude.
that?
I fucking love that.
All right, guys, we hit 50,000 subscribers. Our next goal is 100,000 subscribers. So make sure you click that button to subscribe. We appreciate y'all very, very much. Thank you.